Okay. The only ancient Jedi Grandmaster more powerful than Yoda. First of all, it's very difficult to power scale between the eras. And you say ancient Jedi Grandmaster. So does that mean that they were a Grandmaster from thousands of years before Yoda? Or do you mean that they were also really old? Because there's not as many examples of a long-lived species being a Jedi Grandmaster. I guess we'll see. It's interesting that a lot of these seem largely EU-based, though. So the new canon mustn't be as engaging for people. Anyway, let's have a look. Even though some of the stuff in the previous one was a bunch of new, like, TCW's virtually, you'd say that's more new canon than EU anyway.
Was there an ancient Grandmaster stronger than Yoda, and that maybe could have competed with even Luke? Greetings, Acolyte.
First of all, who's this on the left? Revan was never a Grandmaster, and the only Grandmaster was Nomi Sunrider on the right.
Back to the archives. In Star Wars lore, one thing is made very clear. Ancient Force wielders always seem to have a leg up in their competition for the most powerful users, whether they be Jedi or Sith. The secrets they knew were often lost to history, making the subsequent Jedi and Sith orders weaker as a result of this lost information.
Lost information, yeah. But, my argument is that they had 24/7 combat. And they had a lot of combat between Jedi and Sith to have a lot of experience in that way. And so they would have more skill in fighting another Force user than any in the prequel era. But I do think that the prequel era Jedi probably had the most overall accumulated knowledge, even if they'd lost some of the knowledge from ancient times.
Over times, we look back at some of the Force wielders which existed thousands of years ago in the lore, and speak of how amazingly powerful they were, while comparing them with who we consider to be today's strongest in the galaxy. But there is one debate that we here at the archives are not quite sure about yet, and that is the Grandmaster Nomi Sunrider and how she would compare to Grandmaster Yoda. Nomi Sunrider was an ancient Jedi who became Grandmaster of the Order following the death of Exar Kun, but the feat she pulled off during her time as a Jedi has led many to believe that she is even stronger than Yoda is. Well, as you know, we couldn't possibly pass up this discussion, so it was time for our researchers to open up some scrolls and meditate on the truth. So today, join us as we open up a holocron and determine if Nomi Sunrider was truly more powerful than Yoda, making her...
Alright, so they're focusing on Nomi Sunrider, which is good because I've read the Tales of the Jedi comics and they're really cool. One of the things is sort of what powers they do have, because Nomi Sunrider had battle meditation compared to Yoda is not said to have had battle meditation. But we'll see how things go.
Her the most powerful Jedi Grandmaster before Luke. First of all, there may be some of you who are unfamiliar with Nomi, or just may need a refresher, so let's do a quick recap of who she is. Nomi Sunrider was the wife of a Jedi Knight back in the days of the old Sith Wars. This was around the year 4000 BBY, when Jedi were spread out more and more around the galaxy and were allowed to fall in love and have children.
Yeah, at that point, they sort of had a rule for it. They didn't have the rule for it, but then sometime afterwards, they did get the rule for it. Just gonna double check. That's my work in progress copy that I adjust when I need to. 4000 BBY, right? He's saying. I'm just gonna double check his date. So we've got Golden Age of the Sith, which is earlier. Early Caldroma in the Beast Wars of Onderon, 4000 BBY, yeah. And then the Saga of Nomi Sunrider's 3999 BBY. Yeah, that lines up. It's all good.
On one occasion, Nomi and her husband were at an airport to deliver a bag of kyber crystals to the Jedi Temple on Ossus.
Incorrect, sir! I know that has become the new canon catch-all term, But that is not the expanded universe catch-all term for lightsaber crystals. They were transporting Adegan crystals. Now I'm going to show you. I'm going to have to pull up the comic, aren't I? To show the source for my information. Let me just find it. So, Tales of the Jedi, we want... Oh, I forget which one's which now. Let me double check. 3 to 5. Because before was full of the Sith Empire. Okay, yeah. So it's subtitled Knights of the Old Republic. And then it was number 3, I believe. I will find it. When it loads. Let's continue while we... it just changed what it was saying. Come on, load. Will ya? There we go. So we've got Tales of the Jedi here, number 3 of 5. And here we are. So, view image. Was it this one? Look at that! My teacher gave me these, Nomi. Adegan crystals make some of the best lightsabers. It literally says it in the comic. And this is the very start of the... It's really weird how the art style mixes up for Nomi, but... Read the source material and know the correct term in the expanded universe, which became the catch-all term for lightsaber crystals, are Adegan crystals. It's a more minor nitpick of mine, but kyber crystals do not exist at all in the expanded universe. So I don't like mixing canons.
However, they were attacked by thugs who wanted the Kyber for themselves, and her husband died while protecting his family. In a rage, Nomi picked up his lightsaber and unleashed her devastating potential in the Force, as she slaughtered each and every one of the thugs with her husband's blade. Afterwards, her husband appeared to her as a ghost, instructing her to seek out the Jedi Master Thrawn on the world of Ambria, and it would be there where she would find her training as a Jedi. Although Nomi was frightened by her power and swore off ever using a lightsaber again, she traveled to Ambria and trained under Jedi Master Thrawn. What would happen over the course of the next little while was her learning to...
Oh yeah, it's literally a dinosaur that she learns off of. It's hilarious.
To overcome her fears, and how to hone her extremely strong connection to the Force, and insanely devastating powers. The Jedi Knight Nomi would play a pivotal role in the Great Sith War against Exar Kun, and she would even be the one who led the entire Jedi Order in defeating and trapping the spirit of Exar. In the end, she would become Grandmaster of the Order, a position that she retained for the remainder of her life. Although Nomi would get over her fear of using a lightsaber and began to wield one quite frequently
what is that
after
weird
the start
art?
of the war, she wasn't as proficient with it as some of the other Jedi. That didn't matter to Nomi though, as she much preferred using the Force in combat against Dark Jedi and Sith. A lot of Nomi's raw power would actually come from her master in Thrawn. Thrawn was a quadrupedal animalistic species known to be something of a hermit, and it was said that he knew many secrets about...
I just want to see if Wikipedia even lists the species. Thon, isn't it? Yeah, Thrawn. That's the wrong one. I'll just look at Nomi Sunrider and then look at her master. Masters Thon. Thon, yep. Yeah, it's his species on Wikipedia is listed as Tuchukthai. Here's the spelling. So yes, you can describe him, but you can see that he's a Triceratops. But he's a Tuchukthai, or if you're Tuchukthai, or a Chukthai, if the T's silent. You get that.
The light side that even members of the Jedi Council did not know, and his claim to fame would be his powers in Force Light. He would actually use this to trap and contain a Sith curse inside of a lake on Ambria, and this will be much important to our story later, as this power was something that he passed on to Nomi, who made it her staple ability. But before we jump into that, let's recount some of Nomi's greatest feats. Nomi obviously has far less feats than someone like Yoda, but they are impactful and a huge testament to her power. What's interesting about Nomi is just as the dark side inherently calls to some, the light side inherently called to her, and she was on record as being one of the most naturally gifted light side wielders in all of galactic history. So strong that we say that this would be a modern Sith Lord's nightmare. While she was able to use moderate applications of telekinesis, and was able to reflect blaster bolts with Stupendous, Nomi's real powers lied in the realm of the mind. Nomi was talented in battle meditation, able to rally and meld together the minds of hundreds or even thousands of Jedi, having them all work together in unison.
She'd also befuddle enemies and cause them to see illusions and things, yeah. One of the things I was just thinking of was with Yoda, we've never seen him in his prime. In the expanded universe. I don't know what they've done in new canon. Because I don't care. But yeah.
But when directing her battle meditation towards the enemy, she could confuse them and command them to kill one another instead. She was able to concentrate and shatter the Sith spell controlling the group of dark disciples and creatures known as the Hissis. And this wouldn't be the first time that she managed to break dark side influence. There was once a dark sorceress by the name of Alima Kido, who used Sith secrets in battle meditation to conjure massive illusions during space conflict. She used this power to either conceal Exar Kun's fleet or to make it seem much larger than it was, creating monstrous creatures of nightmares to frighten the opposing pilots and make them spin out of control. Alima pulled this off quite often to secure victories for the Sith Lord. However, when she met Nomi Sunrider in battle, Nomi could sense that this was all just a simple illusion, and used her own battle meditation to utterly crush it. But it doesn't end here. Nomi uses the Force to penetrate Alima's mind. Using the ability known as Mind Shard, it's described as fingers of bright force of energy entering Alima's mind and tearing apart her very thoughts. But as we stated earlier, Nomi Sunrider's greatest ability was Force Light.
So one of the things you could say is that ability that she used against the Sith was a very Sith-like ability, couldn't we? Because it tears apart their mind.
Ability was Force Light, or the power of the Wall of Light. This was a powerful Jedi secret that few have been able to master. Its properties are many, and not always straightforward, but 3 specific Jedi Masters who knew of how to use it to great effect were Jedi Masters Thrawn, Arca Jeth, and Odin The Wall of Light was the ability to conjure the purest form of the light side of the Force, doing so in a way that countered the dark side without fail 100% of the time. Many Jedi considered this to be the most powerful light side weapon in all of the lore. It could either contain the dark side or destroy it completely. The Jedi Arca Jeth used it to purify an entire planet of Freedinad's power, and to trap his spirit inside of a sarcophagus. Thrawn used it to trap an entire Sith curse inside of a lake, and now Nomi would use it to freeze and trap Ulic Qel-Droma in a stasis of pure light. And later, she would combine her power with all of the other Jedi in the Order in order to form a massive wall of light, and trap Exar Kun's spirit in his temple for eternity. But perhaps her most infamous feat was how she used this ability in a unique way.
I'm just gonna say, I love the art. This is cover art from Tales of the Jedi, especially the one on the right here. It's really good.
Against Ulic Qel-Droma. Ulic had once been a Jedi that Nomi fell in love with, but after he was poisoned, he turned to the dark side and became Exar Kun's apprentice. Nomi would do everything she could to defend him to the other Jedi, and tried numerous times working with Ulick's brother Kay to bring him back to the light. However, during the destruction of Ossus, Ulick would kill his brother in a fit of rage. Nomi, watching this all happen, was overcome with emotion and distress. Ulick had a moment of clarity and was left vulnerable as he cradled his brother's dead body in his arms. When this happened, Nomi, in her despair, used a Force light technique inside of Ulick's body, blinding him to his power in the Force. This would render him unable to sense or to use the Force at all.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's like Aang, spoilers for Avatar: The Last Airbender, but Aang taking away Fire Lord Ozai's bending at the end of the series.
We had done this in a flash of emotion, and even though she regretted doing this, she had no idea how to reverse it, since so few people knew how to use Force Light. Nomi was taught how to do this by Master Odin who was now dead thanks to Exar Kun. One thing that should be mentioned though, a very common misconception is that Nomi stripped Ulick of his ability to use the Force, in the same way that Nihilus and Sion had stripped the Force from Kreia. This is not the case though. When Nomi did this, she was simply blocking his ability to use it by blinding him to the Force. And it was revealed thanks to the Redemption comics that Ulick was able to regain his connection to the Force in his last moments of life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a light-sided technique. And I think he makes a good point here that you can see in the Redemption comics, like, if people didn't read Redemption, then yeah, right. But there is a pathway back to regaining your connection to the Force after that technique is used. I remember that. The Redemption arc is a really good comic. Tales of the Jedi Redemption is a good comic run too. And all of Tales of the Jedi is great, but Tales of the Jedi, just as a aftermath type comic, hits.
And so you have it. These are the powers and feats of Nomi Sunrider, the woman who is alleged to be the strongest Jedi Grandmaster in history. We have absolutely no doubts that she was indeed powerful. Her raw talent in the Force, combined with her training by some of the most venerated Jedi ever, resulted in her becoming the strongest Jedi of that era by far. And the other Jedi would agree. But here's where we return to our original argument. Is she...
Are you not going to do a primer on Yoda? Because I think people are quite familiar with the movies, but they're not quite as familiar on anything that would be in the expanded universe.
Stronger than Yoda? At first glance, many would say that yes, she is. Had she been Grandmaster during the time of the Clone Wars, not only would the wars be over much sooner, but she would have been Sidious's worst nightmare. Her abilities to break Sith curses and override dark-side powers with nothing but her mind and willpower make her absolutely terrifying to any wielder of the dark side, especially the Sith. Not to mention her Wall of Light ability would be sure to send the Night Sisters of Dathomir running. But this doesn't necessarily mean that she is stronger than Yoda.
That is a good point. I think that also the powers that they have are very dependent on the time that they're in. Of course, Sidious, and starting with Bane, let's say, Bane was rediscovering ancient techniques from the Sith texts and looking for ancient Sith techniques to use. And then some of that was lost when Darth Gravid turned and all of that. So the way that the Sith would use the Force had changed for the time that they were in. Yet if it was, say, Dark Empire Sidious, that might be a very different story against Nomi. Because the way that they use the Force may be able to now counter the Wall of Light, but we don't know because it's never happened.
It just means that she knew more than he did and had access to knowledge that he did not.
That may not necessarily be true. He may not know more than... She may not know more than Yoda knows. Because Yoda is a long-lived species, 800 years, let's say. We're going versus like him in the prequels, it seems like, rather than in the original trilogy, so about 800 years. And he's lived that long, he would have accumulated a lot of knowledge at that time, but it would be different knowledge and different ways to do things. compared to Nomi.
This is where it gets tricky, but with Jedi knowledge is power. The more you know, the more you can manipulate. In this way, Nomi is stronger than Yoda, but when we are talking about raw power and potential, we haven't seen anything to suggest that Nomi's strength eclipses that of Yoda's.
Because we've never seen Yoda in his prime.
If anything, they may be even with one another, or perhaps Yoda's potential is greater. The difference between them is that Nomi simply knew more ancient Jedi secrets than Yoda could ever learn. She had been...
Again, we don't know that. Because there was a whole repository of knowledge that Yoda would know from 800 years teaching Jedi and things that he discovered himself that Nomi wouldn't. So the knowledge is just different. It's not necessarily that one knows more than the other. Especially since Yoda would have been around at the time when Darth Gravid turned. Now that would be an interesting story to tell, but now it'll never happen.
And trained under both Master Thrawn, a being who is said to know more about the light side than even the might of the combined Jedi Council, and Master Odan the Jedi Archivist of the Great Library, a man who had been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah, she got super pumped with information, but as he said earlier, Nomi was never considered as good at lightsaber combat as her peers. So she relied on her sensitivity to the Force and her Force powers more so she was a consular. Whereas Yoda could quite easily match and probably defeat Dooku in the end, and matched Darth Sidious in lightsaber combat.
Both of these Jedi Masters would give Nomi secrets that they would give to no one else, which is why she became Grandmaster. With the destruction of Ossus came a tremendous loss in Jedi knowledge and light side abilities that Nomi knew and Yoda did not. Had this not happened, Yoda absolutely could have mastered these abilities. But to wrap things up, to compare and decide who is more powerful, we would have to look at them in each category.
You also gotta know that maybe if the knowledge had passed down to Yoda, Yoda would never have had to use it. Other than as maybe a practice thing. So he wouldn't be as good at it as Nomi having to fight against the threats that she had to fight against. Yoda, by the time that the Sith came back, he was out of his prime. He was more sitting back and helping guide the young ones, and not in his prime.
And unfortunately, there just aren't enough feats from Nomi Sunrider. What we said about Nomi being in the Clone Wars was theoretical, as she has allowed her emotions to stop her in the past and become blindsided by them. Nomi has not only lashed out in rage and blocked someone from using the Force, but would make many similar emotionally driven decisions. And we're talking about this even after she was declared the Grand Master. She never recovered from her loss of Ulic or her husband, as she kept personal holo pictures of them around, taking them with her wherever she went. Despite the fact that she is incredibly gifted in the Force, she carries with her a sense of helplessness instead of strength and leadership. In this way, Yoda is the massively superior Grand Master. He may have been blinded by arrogance and dogma, but for the most part, he at least made decisions with wisdom and a clear mind, even on matters that he disagreed with, such as Obi-Wan training Anakin. He would consider all of the angles and rule in the manner that benefited everyone.
Yeah, give Nomi 800 years and she'd do the same probably.
We've talked before about how Yoda was given a loaded deck in his time. At least Nomi had an enemy that she could see. Yoda did not. But nonetheless, potential to potential, Nomi Sunrider is clearly a rival of the Grand Master. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? And who is stronger, Nomi Sunrider or Grandmaster Yoda? Do you...
I've always been leaning towards older Jedi that have actively fought against the Sith and all that to be overall stronger, just because of the experience that they've had and how attuned to the Force they would be and how much experience they would have. Even the Clone Wars was not a very good primer. If anything, the Clone Wars made the prequel Jedi worse because they would have been so used to fighting against blaster bolts that they would not be used to fighting other Force users, with the exception of Asajj Ventress or Grievous. Even Grievous doesn't use the Force, so that sort of thing. So with all of the events of Naomi through her life, she would have honed her Force skills to a finer point in a shorter period of time than Yoda did. At the same time, Yoda, he lives for so long. He holds knowledge from all those years, and Naomi's a human. So Naomi would never live as long as Yoda.
You believe that Naomi could have stopped Sidious in the Clone Wars, and what are your thoughts on some of her greatest feats? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting and supporting the channel, and as always, may the Force be with you.
So Sidious in the Clone Wars. I think one of the greatest assets that Sidious had during the Clone Wars was his ability to mask himself as Palpatine. And I don't think she would have had the ability to detect him any more than Yoda would have. Maybe even less, because there wasn't ever a time where they really tried to, a dark side Force user really tried to infiltrate the Jedi Order, if I remember correctly, and she uncovered them through the Force, and also the masking their presence in the Force is a newer Force ability that would be unfamiliar to her. That's where I think that the whole thing would go, and then it'd just be Palpatine's plans would take her into account, because she would be there, Sidious would do his research and go, well, I'm gonna get you killed by clones. Because, yeah, the light side wall can it stop blaster bolts? Probably not. So in that way, it's not a... It's so different to try and say, okay, someone from one era is as powerful or more. If you're talking about potential, if they had the same knowledge... Yoda has a greater potential, I'd say, just from being able to have more years to do it. If all the other factors were the same and they were plopped into the same era with the same knowledge and all that, I think Yoda, being a long-lived species, would have more potential to hone his skills and be more powerful. But Naomi would learn and accelerate at a faster rate. And they're a product of the time, right? If she ever actually had accepted lightsaber combat more and honed that, then that could have been a thing too. But overall, a lot of that was pretty good, I'd say.
Infamous feat.
I do find that he does such a primer on Naomi and then doesn't give us any information about Yoda. And he just assumes that people know who Yoda is. Because you could mention how Naomi is more powerful than Yoda because Yoda got repelled by the Dathomirian witches when he crash landed on the planet. But that's a hypothetical as well, because it's just taking a mentioned feat, and he would have done so many other feats through the years Although they wouldn't be against Force users unless they were against Dark Jedi, which is quite different to fighting Sith. That was fairly good.
Greetings, acolytes.
Other than...
Was there an ancient...
what are you doing? Other than the things that are already mentioned through the video, that was a fairly good one.